Welcome to this first topic in the new module, funeral advocacy. And really this topic is all about introducing funeral advocacy. So we've got 3 learning outcomes. The first is exploring advocacy and what it means in this context. The second is understanding the difference between a funeral celebrant and funeral advocate. And the third is getting an understanding about why we launched this particular concept. And the assignment, which I'll come back to at the end again, is to explain what you understand about this concept and also to tell us what you think you might offer if you wish to do this. So let's get straight into it. What is advocacy? Well, the term advocate is used in many different ways in different places around the world. Sometimes the term is used to describe a legal expert, so someone you might think of as a lawyer or solicitor. But in this context, that's not what we're thinking about. And in fact, this idea about funeral advocacy is a new concept. It's something that we are not aware is being offered anywhere else. But we know that this idea has its root in advocacy as we know it. So, what does advocacy mean in the way that we're talking about? Well, Mind, the UK mental health charity, has a really good definition that I'd like to share with you. So they say advocacy means getting support from another person to help you express your views and wishes and help you stand up for your rights. Someone who helps you in this way is called your advocate. The role of an advocate depends on your situation and the support you want, but they are there to support your choices. And then they go on to talk about what an advocate can do, which is listen to your views and concerns, help you explore your options and rights without pressuring you, provide information to help you make informed choices or decisions, help you contact relevant people or contact them on your behalf, and accompany you and support you in meetings or appointments. An advocate will not, though, give their personal opinion, solve problems and make decisions for you, or make judgments about you. So, what do we mean by funeral advocacy then? Bearing in mind that definition that you've just heard, which I think, or we think, really summarises what this service is going to be about. So for us, funeral advocacy is about offering practical support to clients who are newly bereaved. So there are a number of things that they may need help with. So it might be about sorting out their finances. It might be about navigating through the legal process of will reading and those kind of things. It might be about changing details on their household account, so changing the account names, for example. Or it might be that you prepare a list of tasks that often need to happen after someone has died, that you can support them to work through. It could be these or any number of other practical things that you can help your client with. Whatever those tasks are, or whatever that practical support is, there's a few things that you need to be really clear about. First of all, that your role means that you will listen. You'll listen to your client so you understand their situation and what they would like to happen, where they have any choice. You will then support them in exploring their options. If there are options, there may not be, there may only be one option, but if there are different options, you could help them to explore what those options are and any potential consequences that might arise from taking any of those different options. And the third thing is about helping establish whether they need support or whether they can do this themselves, and if they do need support, whether they already have someone that can offer that support or whether they would like your help with that. So that's kind of how you'll work with individual clients. For the most part, you will be encouraging them to do as much as possible for themselves. That's always the rule, I think, with advocacy, that you will want to empower people to do as much themselves as possible. The caveat with this is that you're working with clients who are newly bereaved, and that's going to give them a particular vulnerability that may not be there if they weren't in that position. So what that means is there may be things that they need to do that ordinarily would not be a problem for them. However, they're newly bereaved and their emotions are going to be all over the place. And as we've already discussed, I think that does then mean that their ability to think straight, to motivate themselves, and then to focus on the tasks in hand can be impacted by the fact that there's all these emotions simmering away under the surface. So don't assume that this person is not capable of doing those things. Ordinarily they may well be, but in this situation they may need some support to help them through those tasks, particularly in the early days after they've lost their loved one. So a little bit about why we introduced this idea of funeral advocacy. As I said, this is, as far as we're aware, a completely new concept. And really, it came about partly because of my role as an advocate in the past, but also very much informed by the work that Lara did delivering funerals in France. And what she found was that there were some clients who really struggled to find their way through the practicalities of dealing with the death of their loved one. There were some specific additional challenges related to the fact that they had moved to France from the UK. Some of them had been in France for a number of years and were very well established there, but they were perhaps not very confident about speaking and understanding the language, so French. They had limited access to support because their family was based in the UK and they were in France. And whilst they all did have some support in France, they didn't always want to have to rely on those friends that they'd made in France. And the other thing was that they had a limited understanding about the culture and the processes involved in dealing with a death. So those three things were what made it a little bit more challenging for them, because they were based in a country which was not the one that they were born in and had lived in as young people, and maybe right the way through to well into adulthood. So for that reason, we recognised that there was a need for further support outside of the funeral ceremony, and hence this concept of funeral advocacy was born. So what do we mean by it? Now, really, we want to be clear that as a funeral celebrant, you don't need to offer any additional services if you don't wish to. So this idea about funeral advocacy is something that you can consider, but you don't have to offer it if you don't wish to. A lot will depend on your previous experience and skills and whether you feel confident about being able to do that. I think it's fair to say that if you're going to offer it, you probably need a pretty good command of the language of the country in which you're living, because that's going to be really vital. And so if you wish to stay with funeral celebrancy and not move into this area, that's absolutely fine. But the reason we've included this module for everybody in the training is because there is a lot of a lot of the information you'll receive, a lot of the training that you'll receive in this module definitely overlaps with funeral celebrancy as well. So it's going to be useful for you regardless of whether you decide to do this or not. How would it work? Well, in practice, we wouldn't expect that you would offer this service at the first visit. The first visit is all really about getting information to help you prepare the funeral ceremony. So you may well mention the fact that you offer some additional services, and if you have written information, you may even leave that with the client, but refer to it briefly and tell them you'll talk to them more about that after the funeral. You will have an ideal opportunity to talk to them a little bit more because you will arrange an aftercare visit after the ceremony, after you've delivered the funeral ceremony, in which you will take along your copy or their copy of the ceremony, so a family copy of the ceremony. And at that point, you may well choose to talk to them about how they're getting on and whether there's any additional support that you can offer. And that's your opportunity to talk about any of these additional services. And if you think about it, you've already been advocating on their behalf to some degree, probably, because you'll have been getting instructions from them about the ceremony and liaising with other professionals, funeral directors, crematorium staff, maybe other people involved in delivering the funeral. So in a sense, that's advocacy to some degree or another, and you will have built up a relationship and a level of trust with the client, which will mean that they're more likely to feel able to accept any further support from you. So a big part of that, what's going to happen on that visit when you do the follow-up visit, is going to be listening, which is absolutely a prerequisite for working with a client as an advocate. But once you understand any other issues that they have that they need to work their way through, then you can talk to them about those services that you might be able to support them with. So that's how we think this will work. Hopefully that's given you a good idea. We're not going to give you a prescriptive list of the things that you might offer. Obviously, unless you are legally trained, you're not going to be offering any sort of legal service, and you need to make that really clear to the client. So you need to be crystal clear what services you're offering, and you need to be confident about your ability to be able to deliver those things. You also need to make sure that you have insurance which allows you to offer that service, and then you can think about how you will charge for that service. So that's really what we think of as funeral advocacy. Hopefully that's given you an overview about what funeral advocacy is and the role of an advocate in delivering that service. So there you go, back to the assignment. We would like, in no more than 500 words, your thoughts about what this concept of funeral advocacy is. What do you think we mean by funeral advocacy? And also include in there what you think you might be able to offer as a funeral advocate, or if you don't think you're going to offer any of those services, maybe just to kind of outline your thinking behind that about why you don't feel you would like to offer that. We'll really look forward to hearing more about it, and that will be the intro to, that's the end of this introduction, so you'll be moving on to the next topic, and I'll look forward to seeing you again very soon.